In today's tutorial, we're going to talk about configuration properties in Spring, and more specifically, working with lists and maps. Now, configuration properties are a way to bind a property from, say, a properties file or a YAML file into a class or a record, a bean in Spring, if you will. Welcome back, friends. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, and I make videos around Java, Spring, or anything else that I'm interested in. So if that sounds like fun, do me a big favor. Hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to hit some big goals this year. So just go tell maybe 300 of your friends. That would be a big help. Thank you very much. To get started, we're going to head over to start.spring.io. We're going to choose Java. We're going to choose Maven. The latest version of Spring Boot at the time of this recording is 3.2.2. We're going to fill in some metadata about our project. I'm going to start with dev.danvega. We'll call this LM props for list map props. I'm going to choose Java 21. You can choose Java 17 if you like. And all we're going to pick today is web dependency. I'm going to go ahead and click generate. I'm going to download that, and then we are going to open it up in whatever IDE or text editor we're most productive in. For me, that's IntelliJ Ultimate Edition, but feel free to pick whatever you like. With that, let's write some code. All right, so we're going to get started here. I'm going to create a package for our lists. So let's go ahead and say list. And inside here, we'll work with our list. So I'm going to use an example of social media accounts. Maybe I have some social media accounts that I want to go ahead and pull in. So to do that, I'm going to create a new Java class. We're going to call this social media account. And this is going to be a record. And let's just see, what do we want to have in our social media account? I want a name, a username, and a URL. And those can all be strings. So string name, string username, string URL. That looks good. It always does that. Copilot gives you that extra stuff in there. So, okay, that looks good. Social media account. Now, to have some properties around this, I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to say social media properties, right? So social media properties. Anytime I'm creating a configuration properties class, I usually end it in properties. It's just a convention. It's not a hard rule. You can kind of name it whatever you want. But I'm going to go ahead and create this as a record. You could create this as a class. And in fact, in the README in the GitHub repository that you can find down below, I have examples of that in case you want to go that route. So all I'm going to have in this social media properties is a list of social media accounts. We'll call this accounts. All right. So that's it. That's all we need for the record. Now you could, if you were doing this and you had other properties that you wanted to pull in, you could easily add those. That's all I'm going to do for this example. The next step is to mark this with @configuration properties. And then we need to give it a prefix. What are we going to type in our properties file, in our YAML file, to define these properties, to bind these properties over here? And for me, I'm going to do social.media. That seems like a good thing. Now, in older versions of IntelliJ, you used to have to go in and add this like annotation processor dependency in your POM. You don't have to do that anymore. So thank you, JetBrains, for adding that feature. The only other thing I have to do is I have to come in here and I have to enable those configuration properties, and I have to pass in the class that I want to enable. So this will be social media properties.class. So far, so good. This looks good. Now I need to define some properties, and I want to show you how to do this in both a properties file and a YAML file, and then we'll actually test this out to see if this works. All right, so we'll go ahead and type one out, and then I'll paste the rest in. We don't want to watch me type everything, but we can start with social.media accounts. Now, if this doesn't show up right away for you, you can go ahead and run a build, and that will go ahead and make sure that the correct pieces are there to be able to read from that metadata and give you some IntelliSense here. So I'm going to say social media.accounts, and I'm going to create a bunch of these. I'm creating a list of accounts. So here's one gotcha when you're working with lists. This is a zero-based index, so we want to start with 0. If you start with 1, you're going to get an error, and it's not going to be fun. I'm not pointing fingers at who might have done this, but it won't be fun. So let's start with 0, and then we got to define a name for each of these. So I would say Twitter. We can go ahead and just kind of copy that down, and we'll say a username. So a username might be @therealdanvega, and then let's do a URL, And let's go ahead and paste in the URL. So that is what our format looks like. We are creating lists of accounts, all the social media accounts that I want to keep in this application, and then I want to go ahead and use those somewhere in my app. Now, that is one example. I'm going to go ahead and paste in a bunch so that we can see them. So now I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 accounts in here. So I have Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, LinkedIn, Reddit. Now I can pull those lists of accounts into my application wherever I need to use them. So now the question becomes, well, we need to verify that this is working, right? I want to make sure that this works. You could just go into your application, declare a social media properties and have Spring inject that for you, and then go ahead and use it. But I'm going to go a different route. I want to go ahead and test this. So I'm going to open up social media properties. I'm going to say, create a test for this. Yes, I want to test that we get all of our accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a Spring Boot test. I'm going to declare @AutoWired and say that I want my social media properties, and I'm going to get those properties. I'm going to say should list all properties. Actually, let's say should list all social media accounts. That looks better. And now what I want to do is just say properties.accounts, and that will give us a list of social media accounts. And all I want to do is I want to make sure that the assertion that there is 5 there. So that'll go ahead and verify that there are 5 social media accounts that have been basically binded to that particular social media properties. And there you go. We see that. We have all 5 of those. So I have some other tests here that I figured I'd share. I'll go ahead and put these in here. We don't want to watch me type these out. But this will go ahead and check each of those. So we want to make sure that we get a Twitter account, and these are the properties. This is the name, this is the username, and this is the URL. So let's go ahead and run all of these tests and see if those pass. And they do. So far, so good. We were able to basically make a configuration properties for social media accounts that has a list. Now, what if we weren't using the application.properties and we wanted to use, say, an application.yaml? When you get into lists and maps, I feel like using a YAML file for configuration is a little bit easier. It looks a little bit cleaner. So let's go ahead and do that. Application.yaml. And do you use YAML or YML? I don't know. Let's go ahead and paste that in so we don't have to watch me type that. And now you can see that we have that nested hierarchy. So we have social, .media, .accounts, and then for each account under there, we have a name, URL, and username. And I think this, again, just looks a little cleaner, easier to read. If we go back to our social media's properties test, so right here, and we can go ahead and run this again and verify that everything is working correctly, and it is. So that's that. We were able to write some tests against our list. Let's go ahead and close all this down, and let's move on to maps. All right, so I'm going to create a new package here called map, and inside of here, we're going to start with the idea of a website. So I'm going to create a record called website. Let's go ahead and say record. And all this is going to have is a URL. That's all we need to record our website. In here, I'm going to create a new properties file. We're going to call this bookmark properties. So maybe these are some websites that I want to go ahead and reference later. I'm going to call these bookmarks. And what do we want to store about a bookmark? Again, this is just going to be a collection of websites, but we're not going to use a list. In this case, we're going to say, I want a map, and I want the key to be a string. So the key is going to be the name of the website. So Dan Vega, right? And then the value of that is going to be the website. And we'll call this websites, and that's that. So same as before, we need to mark this with @configuration properties. We're going to say that the key for this, the prefix for this is going to be bookmarks. And you'll see we're getting a red squiggly. That just means we have to go back into application and enable this. Now, if you need to enable more than one, you can use this array notation, and we can say bookmark properties.class. And now we have defined those 2 property files as configuration properties that we want to go ahead and enable. So with that, we have everything in place. Again, I'd like to go ahead and add some data. Let's add some data and then we'll write some tests against it. So again, I just want to show you what it looks like in a properties file to begin with. So this, because it's a map, it's a little bit cleaner, right? All we're saying is bookmarks.websites, and then we're giving it a key. The key is the name. So this can be any name. This is a string, right? I'm just hyphenating them here for readability. So I'm saying the key is Dan Vega. The value is going to be a URL. This is the URL of the record. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out and go ahead and pull in what it would look like in our YAML file. And so that's what it looks like there. We have bookmarks, we have websites, and then for every website, we have a key and a value. Now the key is just the name again. The value is the URL. So we're gonna go ahead and save that. And with that in place, we just need to go ahead and write a test against this the same way that we did our last one. So I'm gonna go ahead and say create a test. Yes, we wanna test that. And what are we going to do in here? So similar to our last test, I'm going to write Spring Boot test annotation. I'm going to auto wire in my properties. We'll call those bookmark properties. And all we're doing here is we should get all bookmarks. And to do that, I'm going to say my properties.websites. So we want to get all the websites. And then I'm just going to turn that into a map of string of websites. And now what I want to do is just assert that we have the expected size. So we have 4 bookmarks. I want to say assert equals, and then we can use the size attribute on the websites to get the number of them. So let's go ahead and see if this test passes. And it does. That's really good news. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing as we did before. I'm going to copy in a few things. Again, we're just testing each of those bookmarks. I'm saying, hey, if you get the bookmark Dan Vega, go ahead and access that by its key. So the key is that name, so Dan Vega. And then, hey, this is what the URL should be if we go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and run all of these, and hopefully they all pass, and they do. This is really great news. Yeah, so that's it. This was just a really simple example of working with configuration properties, but I think it could be a little confusing, especially bouncing back from application.properties to application.yaml. I usually use properties for just simple things, but when my applications get a little bit bigger and I have a lot of these nested keys, YAML files just for me make things a little bit more readable. So I hope this was helpful. I hope working with lists and maps are something that you need to do in your configuration properties. And I hope this helped you learn something new today. If you did and you got a little value out of this, friends, do me a big favor. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.